The first time we see Yujiro appearing in the anime after Baki's fight with Kaoru Hanayama, we can see how excited Baki's mother Emi was, feeling that Yujiro is coming. Right after his smiling face, we see how he fighting a polar bear with his bare hands in the past. He dropped from the helicopter right in the room where his son and Hanayama were fighting and tells them to continue their fight. After this scene, we see a flashback about how young Yujiro meets Emi. Then the ogre knocks out Hanayama and Baki. Also, he comes to meet Emi. Next time we see Yujiro in a forest carrying a dead body of Yasha Ape. After this he appeared at the stadion where Baki was training. He had a box with him with the head of dead Yasha Ape in it, which made Baki angry since Yasha was Baki's friend after their fight. They decide that Baki and Yujiro will fight in 1 month. Some time passes and Stridham comes to talk to Yujiro. During the conversation, the ogre learned that Baki defeated Gaia, the master of the battlefield. Baki's father states that this is not a great feat at all and decides to do something much better than his son did. He calls the Prime Minister of Japan and says he'll be here in an hour to kill him. Then he really shows up at the Prime Minister's mansion and defeats a huge number of guards on his own, and then he showed up in the Prime Minister's room and raised his leg up to make a kick. The Prime Minister thinks he'll be murdered, but Yujiro only breaks his desk. He tells him that he should take better care of his protection and then leaves. Before the big match with Baki, Yujiro visits his old friend Kanemoto, who likes to hunt. Kanemoto shows him his great and powerful bow, which he constructed by himself, and Yujiro urges him to shoot him. The old friend finally agrees, but the strongest creature on Earth easily stops the arrow flying in his direction. Shortly afterward, he meets with Emi at the hotel. She wants to show him her crazy love and have sex with him. Then Yujiro tells her that he is not interested in her at all and that if Baki disappoints him in the fight, he will break contact with her. When he leads her to an emotional breakdown, she asks if she can stay the night anyway, but he wants her to leave. When the day of his fight with his son comes, Yujiro is attacked by Gaia, who wants to test his skills. Gaia of course loses the fight, even though both fighters have long been considered by people as equals. Later Yujiro arrives by helicopter at the duel scene, where Baki and many of his friends are waiting. The ogre is accompanied by Emi Akazawa. The big match starts with an unexpected earthquake. Yujiro stops it by hitting the ground. Everyone is surprised by the great power of Yujiro. Baki does his best during the fight, but is unable to give any serious damage to his father. Yujiro is still very satisfied with the level of his son and happily announces to Emi that today he will eat a delicious dish. At some point, excited Yujiro starts brutally knocking out his son and almost killing him, but is stopped by Emi, who in such a critical situation decided to protect her child. Emi attacks Yujiro with a blow to the face. However, eventually the ogre hugs her for the last time and breaks her spine. Then Yujiro gets into a crazy mood and knocks out all the people who came to watch the fight, and then he just leaves the crime scene. Next time Yujiro made his appearance at the end of Baki's fight with Mount Toba in the underground arena. Yujiro suddenly entering the arena and all the people are surprised. Baki is furious at the sight of his father because this is the first meeting in a very long time. He rushes at him impulsively, but Yujiro effortlessly knocks out Baki. He is seen by Doppo Orochi, who also enters the arena. Doppo tells him that he still hasn't forgotten the scars, which are a reminder of their former struggle. Both fighters attack each other, but after a while they stop, and Doppo asks the chairman Mitsunari Tokugawa to set up a match between him and Yujiro. Tokugawa happily agrees to this offer. Later that night, Stradam drives Yujiro to a local boxing gym, where he starts to fight with reigning boxing champion there. During that fight, Yujiro admits that beating other people is better for him than having sex. Yujiro effortlessly defeats the champion named Yoichi Tatsumi and everyone at the gym, then leaves. Later, one day Yujiro meets with Izo Motobe on the street. Motobe tells that he wants to fight Yujiro. The ogre decides to fight on the grass rather than concrete, and Motobe takes this as an act of fear by Yujiro. Unfortunately, he has no chance to win against the strongest creature on Earth. Eventually, Yujiro knocks him out by throwing him to the ground, mockingly stating that Motobe is lucky because they didn't fight on concrete. Next comes Yujiro against Doppo fight. Orochi shows a great fight and Yujiro even needs to use his demon back to beat him. So at the end of the fight, Yujiro rips out Doppo's right eye out of its socket and finishes the match by delivering a punch directly to Doppo's heart, almost killing him. Later he comes to see his son's fight against Kureha Shinogi. At some point it seems that Baki has lost and then Kureha provokes Yujiro to come down to the arena. Yujiro accepts the offer and comes to him, but then Baki rises up and tells his father to not interfere. The ogre looks at Baki's fighting position and guesses what technique his son will want to use. He wishes him good luck and leaves the ring. Then Baki defeats Kureha with the Gotai Jutsu strike. The next time Yujiro appeared at the Maximum tournament, scaring soldiers before that. Yujiro unexpectedly appears in the fighter's locker room. Mitsunari Tokugawa asks him to not destroy his tournament and Yujiro says he only came to watch. Nevertheless, he wants his young companion Yu Amanai to join the tournament. The ogre breaks the spine of one of the competitors, Jigata Sherman, to free up space for his companion. Amanai sees his brutal act and hits Yujiro with his open hand in the face, telling him that he recognizes him as a fighter but hates his violence. At first it is unknown who Yujiro's comrade is, but then it turns out he is a martial artist who met Yujiro in the USA when Amanai worked for the American government. The ogre was impressed by the fighting style and philosophy of Amanai. Most of the time Yujiro sits next to Tokugawa during the tournament and watches the fight. At some point he gets bored and goes outside. He meets a Muay Thai champion named Chow Man. Their fight is very short and Yujiro beats him with just one finger. When Chow Man is knocked out, Yujiro smiles and says that this should satisfy him for a while. During the tournament, Yujiro meets Jack Hanma. When Jack wins his fight in the first round, Yujiro goes into the arena to talk to him. Both fighters are almost starting to fight, but they're interrupted by jealous Baki. Yujiro throws him aside with one blow, so he won't stop them. After a while, Jack walks up to Yujiro and tells him something that makes Yujiro very happy. After a while, the ogre announces that Jack has a very right to fight him. When Amanai fights Doppo Orochi and finds that Doppo Orochi is already damaged enough to finish the fight, he starts asking Tokugawa and the audience to recognize him as a winner because he does not want to use any more violence. Then Yujiro enters and attacks Amanai with a blow of the edge of his hand, deforming Amanai's collarbone. Yujiro calls him a weakling and throws him to the fence of the arena. He wants to fight all current winners in the tournament in exchange for disrupting the tournament. That's when Kureha comes and says that Yujiro should fight the losers because this tournament can't end like this. The ogre beats them all without a problem. Then all the victors enter the arena and starts to provoke Yujiro. However, suddenly Yujiro is shot with sleep bullets. It turns out that those shots were planned by Tokugawa and Baki to stop Yujiro. He is taken away and moved to a closed room with a steel door, but after some time he wakes up, breaks down the door and leaves. Before Baki's match with Kairetsu, Yujiro comes to talk to his son's opponent. He tells him he should be afraid of this fight. During the battle, Yujiro watches his son's brutality and hopes that Retsu will awake the true Hanma spirit in Baki. However, ultimately Baki does not kill Retsu, even though he is very close. After the fight, Yujiro meets Baki and tells him that he is disappointed in his son. When the final fight between Baki and Jack almost takes place, Yujiro meets Jack before the match begins. Jack tells him that when he wins the fight against Baki, he will come to defeat Yujiro. During the final fight, Jack turns out to be the son of Yujiro and Diane Nail, and we see a flashback of how young Yujiro and Diane meet each other. After the fight, Yujiro meets Jack again and is disappointed with his defeat and his destroyed body. He turns away from his son and tells him to leave, but Jack attacks him. A beaten fighter tries to bite Yujiro but fails. In return, the ogre bites Jack brutally. Then he easily knocks out tired Jack, criticizes him for losing twice in one day and leaves. Next time we see Yujiro when he watches television, in which they talk about 5 convicts who have come to Tokyo. He hires Sikorsky to kidnap Kozue. Then Yujiro has a conversation with him which almost ends up in a fight, but suddenly Olive appears to capture Sikorsky. Then Baki appears and Yujiro just watches how his son is fighting Sikorsky. At some point Yujiro comes to his son's house when Baki was with Kozue and encourages Baki and Kozue to have sex as many times as possible in order to make Baki stronger. another. Then Yujiro suddenly appeared and brutalized Yanagi and forced him to admit defeat. Yujiro had a brief encounter with Ally Jr., then he arrived to take a part in the Right Eye tournament. After passing his strange test, Yujiro in his first tournament match finds Ryukayo and violently rips off his face. At some point Yujiro had a conversation with Baki which ends up with Baki flying through the wall. Between the matches he starts to make fun of Kaio Sauman after his loss to Kaku Kaio. Sauman attacks Yujiro in a rage, but Yujiro quickly slams him into the ground, mocking about his inexperience. Later he accepts a proposal from Kaku Kaio to make teams and fight one-on-one, with Kaku Kaio being a leader of one team and Yujiro of another. Then Yujiro and Baki watching Oliva's fight against Ron Shabun, and after the fight congratulate Oliva on his victory. He later fights Kaku Kaio, who managed to put up a good fight, but the fight ends when Kaku suddenly dies of old age. He met Kaku after he was revived and promised to fight again in a century. After this, Yujiro appeared before the Baki's fight against Ally Jr., and after the fight, father and son decided to fight again.
日本との時差実に6時間
行くぜ親父
At the end, America decides to form an alliance with Yujiro. In the other words, USA is completely defeated by one man, Yujiro Hanma.
Me and none of them not travel on any trip. In the seat of corruption, me say many sit. Look like from corruption, them a benefit.